A reading from the Acts of the Apostles. Paul addressed the people in these words: I am a Jew born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in this city. At the feet of Gamaliel, I was educated strictly in our ancestral law and was zealous for God, just as all of you are today. I persecuted this way to death, binding both men and women and delivering them to prison. Even the high priest and the whole council of elders can testify on my behalf. For from them I even received letters to the brothers and set out for Damascus to bring back to Jerusalem in chains for punishment those there as well. On that journey, as I drew near to Damascus, about noon, a great light from the sky suddenly shone around me. I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? I replied, Who are you, sir? And he said to me, I am Jesus the Nazarene, whom you are persecuting. My companions saw the light, but did not hear the voice of the one who spoke to me. I asked, What shall I do, sir? The Lord answered me, Get up and go into Damascus, and there you will be told about everything appointed for you to do. Since I could see nothing because of the brightness of that light, I was led by hand by my companions and entered Damascus. A certain Ananias, a devout observer of the law, and highly spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me and stood there and said, Saul, my brother, regain your sight. At that very moment I regained my sight and saw him. Then he said, The God of our ancestors designated you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear the sound of his voice. For you will be his witness before all, to what you have seen and heard. Now why delay? Get up and have yourself baptized, and your sins washed away, calling upon his name. Verum Domini.
to go and bear fruit that will last. Alleluia, alleluia,
Dominus vobiscum. Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Marcum. Jesus appeared to the 11 and said to them, "Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. These signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak new languages. They will pick up serpents with their hands, and if they drink any deadly thing, it will not harm them. They will lay hands on the sick, and they will recover." Verbum Domini. In 1998, Sporting News listed the top 100 baseball players in all history. And number one on that list was George Herman Babe Ruth. And he played baseball, professional baseball, from 1914 to 1936, or I think it was 36. But right before he died, he wrote a remarkable letter that you can find on the Catholic Education Resource Center. It was actually published in Guidepost magazine in 1948. And my thanks to Father David Simonetti for pointing this article out to me. And he talked about his own troubled childhood and youth. And here was this letter, which I think he also intended for many of the kids who loved him and who wrote to him, that they would read it as well. And here's what he wrote. He said, "Bad boy Ruth, that was me. Don't get the idea that I'm proud of my harum-scarum youth. I'm not. I simply had a rotten start in life, and it took me a long time to get my bearings. Looking back to my youth, I honestly don't think I knew the difference between right and wrong. I spent much of my early boyhood living over my father's saloon in Baltimore. And when I wasn't living over it, I was in it, soaking up the atmosphere. I hardly knew my parents." So we see the importance of the role of the family, of the guidance of parents in their children. It was something that he himself lacked. And because of that, he had a troubled youth, as he will continue to talk about. St. Mary's Industrial School in Baltimore, where I was finally taken, has been called an orphanage and a reform school. It was, in fact, a training school for orphans, incorrigibles, delinquents, and runaways picked up on the streets of the city. I was listed as an incorrigible. I guess I was. Perhaps I always would have been, but for Brother Matthias, the greatest man I have ever known, and for the religious training I received there, which has since been so important to me." And he will talk further about the influence that this religious brother had on his life. He speaks of a grace of conversion, that it was a grace that he received. "I doubt if any appeal could have straightened me out, except a power over and above man, the appeal of God. Iron rod discipline couldn't have done it. nor all the punishment and reward systems that could have been devised. God had an eye out for me, just as he has for you, and he was pulling for me to make the grade. Knowledge of God was a big crossroads with me. I realized that God was not only just but merciful. He knew we were weak and that we all found it easier to be stinkers than good sons of God, not only as kids but all through our lives. But listen to his admiration for this religious brother. I have seen a great number of he-men in my baseball career, but never one equal to Brother Matthias. He stood 6'6" and weighed 250 pounds. It was all muscle. He could have been successful at anything he wanted in life. He chose the church. It was he who introduced me to baseball. Very early, he noticed that I had some natural talent for throwing and catching. He used to back me in a corner in the big yard at St. Mary's and bunt a ball to me by the hour, correcting the mistakes I made with my hands and feet. I never forget the first time I saw him hit the ball. The baseball in 1902 was a lump of mush, but Brother Matthias would stand at the end of the yard, throw the ball up with his left hand, and give it a terrific belt with the bat that he held in his right hand. The ball would carry 350 feet, a tremendous knock in those days. I would watch him bug-eyed. He goes on to say that it was after he left there that then he began his baseball career. He first was a pitcher actually for the Red Sox, and then he was sold to the Yankees, where they won during his time there 7 pennants and 4 World Series. But it was during that time he did many charitable works for kids because he never forgot where he had come from. He never forgot that he himself was one of those dirty-faced kids that, if they were given a chance, could change their lives. But he also wasn't always the best example to them. But he said, when he strayed from the church and about that, he said, people might ask, what good was all that hard work and ceaseless interest of the brothers? People would argue, you can't make kids religious because they just won't take. It won't take. Send kids to Sunday school and they often end up hating it in the church. Don't believe it. As far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as most kids go, once religion sinks in, it stays there deep down. The lads who get the religious training get it where it counts in the roots. It may fail, they may fail it, but it never fails them. And he would say that the kids may appear or want to appear like tough monkeys, as he put it, but deep down and inside, there's a little chapel there. Every dirty-faced kid I see is another useful citizen. No one knew better than I what it meant not to have your own home, a backyard, your own kitchen and icebox. That's why all through the years, even when the big money was rolling in, I never forgot St. Mary's, Brother Matthias, and the boys I left behind. The times I let the kids down were my worst. But then he concludes this letter with, it was an incident 1.5 years before he died. It was in 1946. And he came close to death. He came close to dying. And it was December 1946. He says, I was in a French hospital in New York facing a serious operation. Paul Carey, one of my oldest and closest friends, was by my bed one night. They're going to operate in the morning, Babe, Paul said. Don't you think you ought to put your house in order? I didn't dodge the long, challenging look in his eyes. I knew what he meant. For the first time, I realized that death might strike me out. I nodded, and Paul got up, called in a chaplain, and I made a full confession. I'll return in the morning and give you Holy Communion, the chaplain said, but you don't have to fast. If you're in the hospital, you're not obliged to that Eucharistic fast. I'll fast, I said. I didn't even have a drop of water. As I lay in bed that evening, I thought to myself, what a comforting feeling to be free from fear and worries. I now could simply turn them over to God. Later on, my wife brought in a letter from a little kid in New Jersey. Dear Babe, he wrote, everybody in the 7th grade is pulling and praying for you. I'm enclosing a medal, which if you wear it will make you better. Your pal, Mike Quinlan. I know this will be your 61st homer. You'll hit it. I asked them to pin the miraculous medal to my pajama coat. I've worn the medal constantly ever since. I'll wear it to my grave. So a remarkable letter from the man that has been listed by many as the greatest baseball player in all of history. And I think we look at today's feast of the conversion of St. Paul, and this feast gives us hope because there's more at work than meets the eye. There's a power over and above man, as Babe himself said. And it was this knowledge, this encounter with God that really changed the direction of his life. And at the end of his life, after he had messed up, he was able to return to the God who was still seeking him. Paul was seeking the Christians, but the Lord himself was seeking Paul. And the history of the church is a history of conversions. That's why the church will endure until the end, because God's grace is at work. He's at work in the lives of even those who may be hurting or hating or persecuting the church. And you only have to read some of the biographies of the saints to see that that's true, or even many modern-day conversion stories. There are those conversions that are dramatic, like St. Paul's. There are those that are more gradual, like Babe's. But in all of cases, they are always continual. And so St. Paul, this wasn't just the end of his conversion, it was the beginning of his conversion. He himself would talk about the struggles that he had within himself, doing the things he didn't want to do. But in all cases, and this conversion is something continual. And I think what a point I want to make this morning is that each of us can make some contribution to the conversion of others. You know, in Babe's own life, there was this brother Matthias who simply was kind to him, brought out some talent that he could see in him. He was also being catechized. That was another instrument toward his conversion, something that he said always remained with him. Even when he strayed, that was always there in his roots. You think about also there was his friend at the end of his life, or in that moment where he faced possible death, who encouraged him to go to confession. That was another instrument of his ongoing conversion. We could think of that little boy's letter and the little miraculous medal that he sent to him, another instrument to help him deepen that conversion. And so each of us in some way can be an instrument today. Maybe we're not going to see the fruits of what we do, if we're catechizing, if we're being a friend to someone, if we're being kind to someone. But it's all helping them to accept Christ and to deepen their own life with Christ. So that's the first point that I wanted to especially make, that each of us in some way today can contribute toward bringing somebody closer to Christ. And the second point is that for us in our own lives, that we should look to those things that will build up our faith, that will deepen our own conversion. That's one of the things that EWTN hopes to provide, that we want to put before the faithful, you know, these multiple ways that can help to strengthen your faith, to deepen your conversion, to understand more your faith, and to grow in it. For some people, it may be a talk or even the humor of Mother Angelica that draws them. It could be a homily. It could have been during our March for Life, just the pure smile and the joy of those young people who are standing up for life, that you see something beautiful there that attracts. It could be the clear wisdom of Pope Benedict XVI. So it is for us to present as many things that will help to deepen people's conversions through this network. But each of us, as I said, has a role to play in deepening the conversion of others in our lives. The history of the church is a history of conversion. There is more at work than what meets the eye. And all of us then are called then to be those instruments praying for the conversion of those who may even be persecuting or hating the church. Certainly Stephen's prayer as he was being martyred was one of those factors that led to Paul's eventual conversion, as well as all of the Christians that were being persecuted by him who had learned from Jesus. They had learned from Jesus to pray for your persecutors. We can all do that. We can all, through our own kindness, draw people closer to the source of all love.